Hello everyone, I am the Storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Silence of the full moon. Life is full of stressors. Monotonous jobs whose days make the worker feel as if trapped in a singular moment in time. Bills that reach up to your neck. And of course, the noise. When the noise can get so loud and so invasive, it feels as if ants are crawling over the surface of your brain. That is what Sarah felt. She had moved to the big city just over 3 months ago with the promise of a new job. But lately, she felt that it was all becoming too much for her, and she decided to use her accrued days off and try out a silent retreat that had been advertised around town. She had looked into this place, and she thought it sounded exotic. This retreat was apparently an old mansion that was once occupied by a wealthy family up until the 90s. Not long after the passing of the husband and wife who lived there, their son, named Dorian Crowley, inherited the massive house and, instead of living in it, had turned it into a silent retreat for anyone looking for such a luxury. Sarah couldn't find much information on this latest owner of the mansion, other than he seemed to live a reclusive life and had a mindset of what most would call a progressive, vegan diet, spiritual health, inner peace, and the works. At least that's how she grasped it. Sarah wasn't too big on that herself, but didn't fault anyone for that lifestyle. Besides, she was currently looking for that exact lifestyle for her getaway weekend. So maybe the owner of this retreat might be on to something. Sarah arrived at this rustic manor early in the morning on a Saturday, and she was struck breathless. The manor was Victorian style, with what looked like several rooms, almost each with its own balcony for the tenant to step out and enjoy the fresh air, which was aplenty, as the building itself was surrounded by a thick and vibrant forest. Sarah couldn't see the slightest sign of civilization peeking through these dense trees as they seemingly engulfed the property. There was an eerie quiet surrounding the place, but Sarah had to remind herself that this was to be expected as of the nature of this excursion. She realized that though she'd grown to hate the constant noise and hustle of city life, she had also grown used to it and would have to get over this irrational sense of unease in this place of silent tranquility and embrace it for what it was meant to be. She walked through the front door, and she saw a wooden podium with a log book resting on it. Behind the podium was a remarkably tall man, standing at least 6'7", whose skin was so pale that Sarah wondered if he had ever felt the rays of the sun. This doorman had a name tag on his red vest, which read Dorian, and she thought about asking in a joking way if he had any relation to the Dorian Crowley, who now owned this building. But after registering his stern, expressionless face with the silencing gesture, she decided against it. She opened her mouth to greet him, but before a sound escaped, this doorman raised a long and pointed finger to his lips. He kept an overall stoic expression as he did so, though his eyes grew big as they bore into her own. She stopped herself and nodded, and slowly closed the door behind her out of respect for the other guests at the retreat, though this produced the opposite effect that she had wanted, as it creaked loudly like an irate cat as it inched slowly towards the latch. She winced. Looking up at the doorman, however, his face didn't move, not a single muscle, as the creaky door performed its symphony. He only looked at her in that expressionless, blank way with wide eyes, that finger stuck to his lips as if his boss had glued it there. Undeterred and remaining in character, Sarah tiptoed up to the man. She mumbled. Sarah Whitley? For Saturday at 9? The doorman slowly lowered his finger. His finger moved so slackening down from his lips to the notebook before him that Sarah was starting to worry that she might expect a charge for checking in late, even though she had arrived half an hour earlier than scheduled. After Sarah felt like she had considerably aged, the doorman had written a check mark in one of the blank boxes next to her name. He then raised his other hand, a little quicker this time, thank God, and made a gesture representing one corner of a box. Sarah raised an eyebrow at him, then gasped and mouthed right. At him, she produced her driver's license from her wallet in her purse. The sluggish doorman peered at it, and, in his own character, nodded very, very slowly in confirmation. He made a second check mark on the sheet before him. He reached down into a compartment within the podium and produced a small piece of paper. Sarah took it and saw it read, Sarah Whitley, room number 19, third door on the right, after climbing the stair. Sarah certainly found this entire experience to be a bit odd, and wondered if all silent retreats acted this way. Of course, she didn't know, so she simply nodded at the doorman and mouthed thanks to this shallow doorman. She followed her small instructions as guided until she found her room in number 19. The door thankfully closed silently behind her, this time as she dropped her bag to the floor. She decided to unpack that later, as she wanted simply just to plop on the bed in this decent-sized room and let out a long sigh, like in a movie. And she did just that. She let several moments pass by until she finally opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. She saw the room was mostly kept tidy and uninspired, but there had been various knickknacks spread throughout the place that resembled the moon. Some of them were half moons, or waxed or waned moons, but the majority of them were full moons. She thought this was also a bit peculiar, but knew that the moon was symbolical for inner peace, and let thought nothing else of it. Most of that morning and afternoon was spent as the afternoon suggested: meditation, reading, and focusing on a hobby such as art. It truly was a relaxing day for Sarah, as she found this to be exactly as unwinding as advertised. She stepped out on the balcony attached to her room and watched the sunset as it calmly rolled behind the horizon. Through all this time, she did not utter a single word and heard nothing, from words to electronics to a simple sneeze, from any of her neighboring patrons here. It was in all ways she could imagine a peaceful day. Later, after watching the last flickers of light from the sunset, Sarah moved to the bathroom and relieved herself, washed her hands, and brushed her teeth. She laid her head down on the mass of pillows on her bed with a sigh loaded with tranquility. She lay there for a few minutes until she felt herself begin to drift off into sleep. But just before she drifted totally into a REM cycle, she heard her neighboring tenant snore loudly. That in itself wasn't an issue, as it didn't bother her. But what was unnerving was the animalistic howl that followed soon after. Sarah darted upright in her bed, looking out the window, wondering if she would spot the creature that made the noise. She now heard rustling in the room next to hers. Someone just stood up and out of bed, and they accidentally knocked something over. At the sound of something that thumped on the floor in the neighboring room, the howl sounded again. Only now, Sarah could tell that the howl was inside the building. The sound of rushing, padded thumps raced up the stairs. A wolf broke into the building, Sarah thought frantically to herself. She expected to soon hear the sound of paws rustling against the door next over. But instead, what she heard was a key jingling in a lock. Sarah held her breath, making every conscious effort not to make a sound. The neighboring door now swung open, and Sarah heard a blood-curdling scream come from the next room over. "No! No, 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 no!" their voice pleaded. They were answered with a tremendous growl that made Sarah's spine chatter from her pelvis up to her jawline, and now understood why frightened characters' teeth chatter in a cartoon. Sarah heard a struggle in the room beside her, as she could hear things being knocked from shelves and shattering on the floor. And now a mixed sound of thump, 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 paired with what Sarah could only describe as something being drug through the doorway and out into the hallway. Sarah stood up from her bed, and despite all her instincts yelling at her to cease, she slowly turned the doorknob of her room. Quietly as she could, she peered her head out into the hallway. In the light of the moon piercing through the hallway window, she beheld a sight that she didn't know how to comprehend. In the hallway was what looked like a wolf with red eyes that almost glowed in the moonlight. This wolf was standing on its hind legs, though it had an elongated torso that reached so far up its head, almost brushed against the ceiling. Wrapped around the chest of this wolfish creature was a stretched and torn red vest, which had pinned to it a plastic name tag that read Dorian. Below this monster was the limp body of a middle-aged man with a round and plumb belly, with a bleeding laceration in his temple. This man, whom the wolf creature was dragging across the floor by his ankles. Sarah gasped in astonishment, then raised a hand to her mouth to silence herself, though she knew already she was too late. Her eyes bulged as she watched the wolfman's eyes dart up to match her own. They stared into each other for what felt like an eternity, until the creature raised one gnarled claw to its mouth and made a sickeningly human shush motion before it looked back down to its victim and continued to drag it down the hallway and then down the stairs, the unfortunate man's head making a nauseating thump with every stair it collided with as they both descended. Sarah coughed back a scream as she flew the door shut in front of her and rushed to a corner in her room below the window. Despite her hands, which now cusped over her ears, she heard that reverberating howl around the thick trees outside, which was followed only once by a scream by the newly awakened victim of the wolfman, a scream that was cut short with a blood-curdling gurgle. Chomp, chomp, chomp. The noises that followed. Sarah felt sick to her stomach, but was too terrified to move from her spot. Part of her knew that was useless, as this monster had already seen her in this room. But the rest of her demanded that she stay perfectly still in this one spumba, out of view, but out of scent. There she sat, huddled for the rest of the night. When the first light of the sunrise had peeked through her window, she gathered up her things and rushed downstairs, ignorant of the unwritten house rules of silence, as her bag thumped down the stairs. Thump, 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 it went. And with every thump, she thought of that poor man's head as he was dragged down. She made it to the doorman and sputtered quickly. "Checking out early, thank you." But with her hand holding the door open, she stopped in her tracks, swiveling her head around to look at the doorman, who hadn't yet made a note of her early departure. It was the same man as yesterday, and instead of writing anything down in the notebook before him, he kept that same solemn and silent expression, with the bulging eyes glaring at her, as he raised a long and gnarled finger to his lips, giving her the shush gesture. Sarah glanced down at his vest, this one for today, now a sky blue, with a name tag which read Dorian. Her eye twitched at him as her hand trembled on the door. She opened her mouth to say something, but all she could muster was a weak groan. She darted out the open door and towards her car. She could feel his eyes digging into the back of her as she ran, though she never looked back. To this day, Sarah never went to another silent retreat, yet had refrained from making a single sound at night, especially on nights like that one, where the moon was full and the silence could be cut with a single howl. The penultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife. Not anymore. True. And given the insides of her skull confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, hello, Peter, said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. "Peter, what the hell? She just showed up," he said with a shrug. "What do you want from me?" "Right," said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. "Gather round. Family meeting time." Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. Are you even part of our family anymore? Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. Soph, Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost? She's obviously a zombie, Eileen snapped. I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen? No. Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real. Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie, Eileen pouted. I am a revenant. Peter and Eileen shared a look. What's a revenant? He asked. I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell, told you lawyers went to hell, Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. Thing is, Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too. But not until. She took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy. Peter looked at his paper and gulped. Is this written in blood? It's Lucifer ink. By Lucifer ink, Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though. Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. What if we don't sign? Eileen asked. Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again? Peter asked. Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise. Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. What kind of pen is that? asked Eileen. A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk. What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble. What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a wed glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish. And if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it? So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. Maybe someone else would want to watch something, Eileen said. Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV, Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. You mind turning that down at night? Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. It's just, I can't sleep. Yes, Peter, said Sophie. I do mind. And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over, and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. This isn't working for me, Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. This isn't how I pictured our early retirement. Peter nodded again. Are you listening to me? Christ, yes. What do you want from me? I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract. Well, she would have murdered us. And, the whole hell thing. Whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard. What with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead." "Super. So very encouraging." "Shh. Wait. There's more." Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. "Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the Revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else." Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. "What do you suppose that means?" "I guess," Eileen hedged, "if one of us were to die, then..." Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her, a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. "I think we should see other people," he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer. until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. "It's not you, it's me," she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. "Truce," he wheezed. "Yeah," she managed, and then coughed. "I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one." "Hey, do you smell that?" Eileen sniffed. "Is something burning?" Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. "Oh, hell," he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight. Neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. "Damn it," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "You two are just the worst." And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. "General!" My eyes fly open, like I'm waking from the dead. I start up, tossing aside the blanket that had been tangled around my legs. Something woke me up. I kick dirty laundry out of the way and shift my body to sitting up, head swimming. The sunlight is too bright in the room, and I find myself squinting around. When I lean forward, my phone tumbles off my lap, hits the edge of the coffee table, and clatters to the floor. I wince. "Shh!" I hiss at it. Why is that so loud? It echoes through the whole house. I look down at the dark phone, way far away on the floor, and can't convince my arms to swing down to grab it. What's the point? So I can open it up and do what? I breathe in, smelling the stale smell of the old blankets wrapped around me in a cocoon. And because there's nothing better to do, breathe out again. I can feel stiffness in my stomach from the surgery, the stitches stretching with my skin. I'm hungry. I should haul myself to my feet, drag myself into the kitchen, and find something to eat. I try to imagine doing all of that, standing up, moving, opening the fridge, getting out ingredients, putting things in a bowl. I swing my head to the right. There's my water bottle. I can drink some water. I try to force my brain to imagine telling my husband, when he gets home from work, what I did today. I drank some water from my water bottle. I breathed in, and I breathed back out. I decided to keep breathing in and keep breathing out, because it was easier than not doing that. I look down at my right arm, and because it would be embarrassing if I can't even manage that, I lift my arm, pick up my water bottle with fingers made of lead, and swallow some water. I have been back from the hospital almost a week after my ordeal, and somehow swallowing water is still the most I can manage. The TV is on, and there's a very serious news lady droning on. She's talking about the spread of the virus, and there's a map with splotches of red. I don't want to listen to this, to see the red slowly seeping into our state, getting closer and closer to us. I want it to be quiet. She's talking so loud, she needs to be quiet. But I don't know where the remote is, and I don't know if I can remember which buttons to press. I lean my head back and think about going back to sleep. But if I go back to sleep, at some point, I'll be woken up again. And then what? Once, I liked waking up in the morning, greeting the fresh world and whatever the day held. Now, after what happened, when my eyes open, I just wonder when I can shut them again. I don't have to feel hungry when I'm sleeping, and don't have to worry about finding something to eat. Thump. There's a thump on the porch steps. My eyes trace past the cluttered living room, past the TV, out the window, and as he moves, I catch a glimpse of him. There's a zombie climbing the porch steps. I start to stand. Sharp pain shoots through my stomach. I stiffen and pause. Is that pain new? I don't remember it from yesterday. I leverage with my arms, stiff and sore, and haul myself to my feet. I kick at one sock that's slowly coming off my foot and shuffle around the pile of laundry to get to the window. Surely I saw something else. Right? I'm sure I didn't see a zombie. The lady on the news is saying to be very, very careful. She's saying that the virus spreads not just from the bite, but that it's in the water supply too. She's impressing on us how dangerous it is, because everyone knows that zombies are incapable of hurting other zombies. That's why it's spreading so fast. I reach the window and stop. My arms are limp at my sides, and I can feel the lopsided bun on my head slowly falling out. There's something damp on my sweatshirt. What did I spill on my sweatshirt? Outside the window, I see him. He's climbing the porch steps. He's lifting one foot, and he's looking down at it. Then he's dropping it, thump, onto the step. He's lifting the next foot. He's looking at it, then he's dropping it. Thump. I take a step back. He's an old man, a stranger I don't know, with stringy gray hair and mottled green skin. The brass buttons on his moldy wool coat still shine in the sunlight. Looking at them, makes one half of my head ping with pain. His fingers are curled into claws. His face is gnarled into a wince. His teeth slimy and yellowed. I turn away. Thump. He's a step closer. I turn again. On the floor of the living room is a bath towel. Oh, that's why my shirt is wet. I took a shower this morning. I start to move, pushing my feet forward. One, then the next, then the other again. I reach for the doorway to the kitchen. Like, if I can find it with my fingers, I can draw myself through the doorway faster than my feet can move me. Why are my feet so slow? I kick the bath towel out of the way. It's still damp, like my sweatshirt. What do? I say, careful to keep my voice low. I'm somewhat surprised to hear my own slurred speech. Who am I talking to? What do? What was the plan? Was there a plan? My brain tried to slog through the past day to remember the plan. I remember my husband this morning. He was leaving the house to go to work, I think. He must have been, because he was wearing his jacket and was standing in the doorway. And I was sitting on the couch, heavy-armed and tired. And he'd told me. What had he told me? The same thing he told me every day. Do something for yourself today. Just one thing. I must have said something back, because he smiled at whatever it was. One specific thing. I reach the kitchen doorway. That's why I took the shower. I remember now. That was something for myself. Thump. The newest thump was so much louder than the others that I grasped the kitchen doorway to keep myself from falling. A needle of pain wriggled through my abdomen. Quiet, I hiss toward the front porch. The zombie had made it up the steps and is at the door. I can see his shadow through the window as he leans heavily on the door. Thump. He hammers again. Shh, I say desperately. He needs to be quiet. Doesn't he know he needs to be quiet? I start to draw myself around the kitchen island, one hand over the other, guiding my stiff body. It's not as bright in here, and I can see better. My eyes fumble over old takeout containers and empty water bottles, and the sink piled high with dishes. Piled so high with dishes. Before I went to the hospital, I would have never let it get this bad. The gloves I usually use to wash the dishes are 1,000 miles away, down on the floor by several pairs of socks. Thump, crack, creak, creak. I stop, my hands placed on the kitchen counter, holding me still. I know that creak. It is a sound that washes over me every evening and fills me with relief. Why? Why do I love that sound? Now, it's the sound of the door opening as the zombie walks into my house. The zombie is walking into my house. No, oh no, I whisper and look around the dim kitchen. Where's my phone? It's in the living room. Thump, thump. Footsteps in the living room. And I hear a ragged, rancid breath. Suddenly, my hands let go of the kitchen counter, and I'm moving. My feet carrying me, careening through the house, stumbling, unmoored, out into the hall and across and into the dark, dark bathroom. The door shuts behind me, and I blink once and again and again. Images of the spinning rooms spiraling in my vision before settling into the dark outline of the bathroom. Sink, toilet, empty toilet paper rolls, trash overflowing, and from down the hall, from the living room, I hear a voice. I can hear you in here. No one ever told me they talk. The zombie's voice drips under the bathroom door, snaking up my leg and draining into the pit of my stomach. His speech is slow and meticulous, his dead mouth trying to remember how to form words. You are breathing, the voice says. You are breathing so slow. Why are you breathing so slow? Why am I? I can't think. I can't make my brain think. All I can see when I close my eyes and remember is my husband standing in the doorway, looking at me. Why is he looking at me like that? Full of pity? Why is he speaking to me so slowly? Do one thing, he says, the words echoing in my sluggish mind. Do one specific thing, just for you. I did. I did what he said. I look at the bathtub. I took a shower. A few water droplets are still dripping down from the shower head. I move forward, leaving the bathroom door. I hear heavy footsteps moving so slowly through the house behind me. I need to tell the zombie to walk quieter. He needs to be quiet. I hold out a hand, and I shiver as a cold water droplet splashes into my palm. I can barely see it in the dark, but my heart starts to sink, slowly, dropping from my chest down into my stomach, where slow, steady panic is building just under my ribcage. Why am I full of dread? Why does the water on my skin make me feel sick? Why can't I move fast enough to get to safety? My brain used to be smart and quick. Now it isn't. I'm never going to be quick again. I will find you. I jump as the voice sounds again. This time, closer. He's just across the hall in the kitchen. He's looking at the sink full of dirty dishes. I yank my hand out of the shower like it's a fire and start moving again, letting my feet stumble and rush. My hand fumbles on the doorknob and the door swings open, and I see a shadow cutting across the floor of the hall. I've lost a sock, and my feet stamp. 1, 2, 1, 2, down the hall. I pass a closed bedroom door on my way. I need to be quiet. Stop being so loud. Why are you running? The rasping voice grates through the house. I can feel you. You're tired. You want to sleep. I reach the basement stairs, and I stop. To my left, the back door of the house, leading out into the overgrown backyard, and the bright sunlight dappling on the grass and flowers. I think I can smell the fresh grass and perfume of the flowers, even from here. And to my right, the rickety basement stairs, leading down into moldy darkness. You don't want to escape. Where is there to escape to, anyway? My feet are stuck to the floor. I can't run. I look down at my hand, damp from the water from the shower, and I remember that I took that shower for me, and that when I was done, I sat on the toilet in my towel, shivering and shaking, and I didn't feel better, and my ears were ringing with screaming, and my head was aching, and my stomach was twisting, and I was tired. I told them at the hospital I was so tired, and they sent me home anyway. It's all I can think anymore, and no amount of warm showers make me feel better. Why not? I can't seem to feel better. I'm tired. I turn away from the back door, and my feet drop onto the basement steps. I hear him behind me. Thump, thump. He's following. My feet hit the basement steps. Thump, thump. He's following. I reach out, raking my fingers along the concrete walls, balancing my stumbling legs and feet. Where are my feet? Where did I leave them? Oh, they're here, right underneath me. I reach the cold floor of the basement and step over a puddle at the base of the steps, and I pass the light switch on the wall. I can see from the pale light that shines in through the small windows, bins and boxes piled up where I left them, half open and spilling their contents on the floor. That was from before, when I cared about organization and neatness. Now, I can't even look at them. That's right, the croaking voice says. It's coming from the top of the stairs. It's grinding down the wood steps and splashing onto the concrete floor. Go down into your grave. Go down to drown alone. You do not want to walk back up again. My fingers trail along the dusty top of a box, then the edge of a bookshelf loaded with cans of beans and tomatoes and vegetables. My glazed eyes trail over the rows of cans, and I have to blink myself awake. I used to be different. I used to be awake. After what happened, whatever else there is, it's like I'm gone. I have to press a hand to my stomach, holding in my stitches and my guts even to walk. I miss the person I used to be. My feet shuffle along, 1 foot warm, 1 foot cold, 1 sock on, 1 sock off. I weave my way through the old bikes and laundry baskets to where the washer and dryer are crouching in the corner. I can hear his loud feet on the steps. One thing, one specific thing, just for me. I want to scream, to fill my lungs and holler as loud as I can, but instead it comes out as barely a whisper. Be quiet, I hiss. You need to be quiet. My hands rest, one on the washer, one on the dryer. I pause. I need to remember how to use my knees. I look down, and I remember, and bend, twisting at the waist, and bending my creaking knees all the way down until I'm on the floor. It's damp down here, water trickling in through the cinder blocks and oozing through the cracks in the floor. I place one hand on the cold floor, the water stinging my fingers with how cold it is. I reach behind me with the other hand. He's on his way down the steps. The steady thump, thump, thump echoing through the house. He's going faster because he knows. He knows why I came down here. Shh! Behind me, a dial on a metal safe clicks. Thump, thump, then splash. He reaches the puddle at the bottom of the stairs, and my eyes slowly look up. He's tall and broad-shouldered, and I can see, in the dim light, the glint of his yellow teeth gnashing together. His eyes narrow when he sees me. Click, click, the dial behind me. There you are, he says, and he's moving, his hands bumping into dusty boxes and canned goods. I'm still crouching, and I can feel the water seeping into my sweatpants. I should be shivering, but I'm not. It feels almost warm. Warm like blood, like my blood, pumping through me, swift and sure. Here you are, he says. The safe clicks open, and my hand closes over something familiar and solid. You're hiding down here to be found, he says, an ugly smile curling his gray lips. I'm holding the familiar object in my hand, and his eyes land on it. The smile widens, his teeth grinding together, spit dripping out of his mouth and onto his moldy coat. I raise a shaking hand. I pull in breath, and I let it out again. You can't do that, he says, his mouth fumbling over the words, spitting them out one at a time. He raises a crooked finger with a broken, bloody nail, pointing toward the ceiling and the floor above us. If you do that, you won't be quiet. Don't you want to be quiet? I do want to be quiet. I want to curl up down here in the warm water and sleep, where I can't feel hungry and my stomach and hips and back don't hurt, where my head doesn't ache. He must see my shoulders sag, because he takes a shuddering step forward. You came down here to die. No, I say, and my voice is louder than it should be. One specific thing, just for me. I can feel my hands again as they raise the gun I'd pulled from the safe. and level it at the zombie. His old, dead eyes don't change or look alarmed. I'm here because I want to live. Bang, thump. Upstairs, in the bedroom I had skipped, suddenly startled awake, my newborn baby starts to cry. I look at the rows of canned goods, vegetables and beans and soup. I think it's time to cook some lunch. 28 sleighs. Later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. Don't worry, love. I've got this one. Rosemary frowned at him. But everybody's here. Who could it be? He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. Carolers or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off. A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming, hold your horses. But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob? The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. What? He grunted. Let go of me. The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall. An animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. "Get out! Get out!" The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans!" That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. What? He licked his lips. What do we do? Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. Ho, ho, ho. It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with. Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. Groovy, Santa bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege. Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me. Santa raised one gloved finger. Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty. He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eating is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in